Hello there everyone and welcome to Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for Beginners. My name is David and in this final weapon guide we are going to be covering one of my old favourites, and that being the Great Sword. The Great Sword is known for its pure simplicity as well as its infamous damage output among all of the weapons within the game. It is because of this that many players choose to use the Great Sword as their weapon of choice, but in many cases they find that newer players are not using the weapon in the most optimal fashion, making them believe that the weapon is slow, both in terms of movement and attack speed, as well as its potential DPS output. However, when used correctly, the Great Sword becomes a precision-based powerhouse, which in turn is capable of felling monsters with very few hits at all, being both efficient and deadly in the hands of an experienced player. The issue here for me to explain is that in order to use the weapon effectively, the player needs knowledge that I cannot directly teach through this video guide, but instead comes through experience. This knowledge is known as timing and monster expertise. This is because the Great Sword's use is centered around one thing, and that is its charge mechanic. The charge will therefore be the bread and butter of the player's damage output, and as such it should be prioritized above all other measures of damage output as long as the situation allows for it. At a very basic level, the higher the charge level, the higher the multiplier, and the higher the damage output. The issue of timing comes into the equation when the player realizes that more time is needed in order to reach the highest charge level and in turn do the most damage possible. As monsters do not necessarily stand still, and this then requires a level of perception from the player, similar to that of the gunning weapons in order to reliably pull off level 3 charges within a given time frame. The gunning principle of perception therefore should be learned in order to judge when and where the player should attack, not only to maximize the damage output, but to also prevent the player from recklessly placing themselves in a line of fire. To be truly effective at this thinking process, the player needs to have some knowledge of the monster that they are currently hunting, the most important of which are the attack patterns and general movement of the given target. As target knowledge in combination with a good sense of timing and positioning ultimately makes the Great Sword the juggernaut of the damage per hit meters, and because these factors are so important, I'm going to help you get started by demonstrating a few basic game mechanics and realistic scenarios that should help you out regardless of how experienced you are. Before all of that though, the first thing you should learn is the charge mechanic until you fully understand how long a charge takes in order to be maxed out and then released. The charge can be released a bit early to shave off some extra time, but this practice is predominantly important for judging openings to land your charges. The majority of monsters in the game have a variety of telltale signs of what they are likely going to do next to otherwise provide openings for you to exploit. It is important that you take notice of these in order to use the weapon effectively and to exploit the situation in order to do as much damage as you possibly can. To give you a couple examples of this, Rathian and Rathalos will likely charge you if they turn around quickly. They will likely fireball you if they turn around slowly. Barioth will often attack in triangles, and they will also regularly taunt you after charging. Diablos will usually tail slam you after a charge, which leaves his right leg vulnerable to attack, and they will also roar a lot, granting several opportunities for high-grade earplug users. Xenagor will usually need to charge roughly 3 times in order to go Super Saiyan, which provides ample opportunities for you to hit the head. Their claws and feet have fairly low breakpoints, and knocking them off their feet is also fairly straightforward. When they are close to powering up, you should charge attack the tail in order to avoid the power-up backlash while also doing some respectable damage. These are of course not all of the vulnerabilities in the monsters discussed. You're going to have to go out there and find them out for yourself, and I of course didn't mention every monster in the game. This is because in this video I cannot possibly go in detail to do with every monster's vulnerability, weak points, or further exploits where you can do more damage to them in a variety of ways, but that should give you a little example of what I'm referring to. So in this case, just pay attention to what you're fighting and see how you can exploit the situation. In a general case, however, the easiest avenue to exploit is when a monster is tired or pauses. Likewise, a roaring monster is an easy target to land a charge on if the player has the appropriate set of earplugs. Finally, you should get in the habit of recognizing that most monsters need to turn twice in order to face you. Using this to your advantage can help you land that level 3 charge in the right spot before evading their next attack. It's also important to note that not all scenarios call for a max level charge attack, and what you will do will largely depend on the given circumstances. The charge is of course the priority, but if there is no way for you to safely land a good level charge within a given time frame, but a simple unsheath attack will often suffice. This is surprisingly effective if the player has critical draw as one of their armor skills. Likewise, if you're endangered, it is better to cut your charge short and get out of harm's way than to hope for the best and risk taking damage. As far as attack combinations are concerned, if the monster is incapacitated, you will of course want to lead in with a charge. In most cases, you will then follow it up with a horizontal slash, and then afterwards follow up with another charge and rinse and repeat as long as you are able to do so, and the process doesn't put you out of position. But in general, this is the best method for dealing the most damage in the shortest amount of time. If this combination would force you out of position, then replace the horizontal slash with a slap and follow suit with an overhead slam charge if possible. It's also important to note that in order to increase your damage output from a playstyle perspective alone, you will want to hit your target with the very center of your blade. If you do this, then you will receive the best damage multiplier for your charges and therefore increase your damage potential even more. As some of the concepts that I've highlighted or the knowledge needed to effectively use the greatsword can be a bit intimidating of what I've just said previously, I'm going to highlight some skills to help alleviate this learning curve to using the weapon effectively, which should help you out in the long run. The first set of skills I want to go over are any skill that really helps the player either attack more often, land more charges, or get out easier. Now the three skills I highlight in this case are Focus, Earplugs or otherwise equivalent, and Quick Sheath. Arguably the most useful greatsword skill is Focus. Focus will decrease the time it takes for the greatsword to be charged. This will be invaluable in terms of damage per second, but it will also help newer players come to terms with timing, as it is fundamental to using the weapon set effectively. The relevant set of earplugs will provide more opportunities for the player to land more charges over the course of entire fights. This not only affects the on-the-spot damage output, but also indirectly affects how many times you will lightly topple an enemy creature to help hit specific parts of monsters. It also makes sure that since the monster is otherwise incapacitated by being knocked over, that you can then further land more level 3 charges and therefore do more damage over the course of entire fights. Finally, Quick Sheath can indirectly affect the damage output of the weapon, as well as help the player escape after landing a charge, simply because the weapon is put away much faster, allowing you to run or dive out of harm's way. As far as skills that will directly influence the amount of damage inflicted via the greatsword, there are only really two I really need to talk about. The first is Critical Draw, and the second is Sharpness +1. Critical Draw adds plus 100 affinity to unsheathed attacks. This includes charging from sheathed, so your charge attack from the weapon being sheathed will still count as an unsheathed attack. This will be, in most cases, a guaranteed crit, unless of course the weapon you are using has negative affinity. For example, if the weapon you're using has negative 15 affinity, Critical Draw will add 100 to that and you will end up with positive 85 affinity. So not all of your unsheathed charge attacks will be critical hits. In any case, critting, guaranteed critting more so, from charge attacks will be paramount to increasing your damage output exponentially. Sharpness +1, like with all Blade Master weapons, is useful for reaching the purple level of sharpness. Sharpness +1 in combination with the efficiency of the greatsword will ensure that the sharpness level will last for the majority of the hunts, but will result in a higher damage multiplier for all of our charges. To recap on the advantages of the weapon, the first and arguably the most notable is that the weapon is capable of the highest damage per hit in the entire game. This in turn means the damage output of the weapon is overall very high. Because of this, you will break stagger limits and monster parts quite easily. The weapon has good reach, which allows you to hit a wide variety of targets. Due to the high damage per hit ratio, it retains its sharpness very well, so you won't need to be using whetstones too much. The weapon can block if you ever need it in an emergency, and of course it can cut tails. The weapon's disadvantages include its slow movement speed overall while the weapon is unsheathed. Blocking isn't ideal in the vast majority of circumstances, as a successful block will shred your sharpness to no end. The weapon requires a fair bit of timing and mechanical knowledge to use effectively. And finally, the weapon requires a fair amount of practice in order to get right, but when you do get it right, it'll be easy as anything else to you within this game. As I have already discussed these skills, I'm just here to highlight how important these skills are within your greatsword armor sets. All of these skills are beneficial to greatsword users, so in most cases your armor sets are going to likely include 2 to 3, sometimes 4 of these skills within there. So please do not skimp out on these skills in light of some other skills which may seem minor in comparison to the contribution these skills make to your given gameplay. As always, however, feel free to mix it up, see what you like, see what you don't like, see what you're going to put in, see what you don't put in, and ultimately make your set based on your own preferences. In any case, ladies and gents, this about wraps up the final installment for the Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for Beginners Weapon Guide series. I hope you've enjoyed this video in particular, as well as all the videos I have made. I also hope that you've got some useful information from those videos, and I want to personally thank you for watching all of them. Anyway, ladies and gents, that about wraps up this episode for the Greatsword. I hope you go ahead and try the weapon. It remains my old favourite and has been so since the very first game. And try and get past the learning curve. It's well worth it in my opinion. Anyway, guys and girls, have a great day. Thank you for watching, as I said again, and I'll see you later.